Pour me more wine, Alcinous. Listen, listen to how the last of human hope vanishes. Listen to the rest of my descent into the night. Did you think that after the gates of the underworld and the shrieks of Hades, a mortal had nothing left to fear? I thought so too. Naive fool. But the living depths of the sea had built a cruelty for me, one that bleaches out every torment of the dead. Part 1. The Ashes of Elpenor and the Witch's Fate. The current of the ocean spat our ship back out into the open sea. The sun rose over the horizon again, but its light no longer warmed my skin. After Hades, everything looked faded and gray. We returned to the palace of Circe. The witch's island met us with its old stench. Elpenor was rotting on the rocks. Our fresh corpse, whose broken neck and pointless death I had just witnessed in the realm of shades. There, amidst the ashes, I had given him an oath, and here, among the living, I had to pay my first debt. We dragged his cold, stiff body onto the cape, built a bonfire. Fat hissed and popped in the fire. The stench of burning hair filled our lungs with the heavy reek of death. We heaped a high mound and thrust his oar into it, the very wood he held in his hands before falling drunk from the roof. Why does a dead man need an oar on a cliff? An attempt to clutch at the former world, the first price for the right to return. Circe learned of our return. She came to the pier accompanied by maids carrying fresh meat, bread, and sparkling wine. But after the black broth I had fed to the dead, all this food tasted like dry straw. Twice mortal, the goddess hissed, a mix of wonder and quiet contempt gleaming in her eyes as she looked at our hollow faces. She laughed at us. Ordinary men die but once, yet we voluntarily went down into Hades, only to die again now. All day my men feasted, stuffing their bellies, and when night fell upon the island, Circe drew me aside. She made me recount, in every raw detail, every word the blind Tiresias had spat into my face. When I finished, her face went pale. She understood that the noose of fate had already tightened around my throat. Laying her slender fingers on my shoulder, she revealed the deadly traps ahead. She gave clear instructions on how to avoid them, but my boundless pride turned those warnings into weapons against my own men. First you will come to the Sirens. Her voice cut the night silence like Trojan bronze. They are no gentle nymphs, they are monsters, enchanting every traveler with their song. They sit on a blooming meadow, but that meadow is white with human bones, still reeking of rotting flesh. Whoever hears them will never return home. No wife will meet him at the threshold, no children will hold him, for the Sirens bewitch the mind, leaving the body to wither among the corpses. She ordered me to plug my companion's ears with soft beeswax. "If you yourself wish to listen," the witch whispered, "have your men bind you to the mast with heavy ropes. If you beg to be let loose, tie it tighter until the joints crack." Then her words drew two paths, each more terrible than the last. The first, the wandering rocks, the planctae. Chaos rules there so completely that not even a dove can fly through without losing its wings, and no ship has ever passed unscathed, save for the legendary Argo, guided by Hera herself. The second path lay through a narrow strait between two cliffs. The first cliff thrust its sharp peak straight into the sky, forever choked in a black cloud. In its midst, in a dark cave, lives Scylla, a 12-legged, six-headed monstrosity. 3 rows of sharp teeth bristle from her yelping maws. She barks like a young pup, but she snatches 6 warriors from every ship at a time, 1 for each starving throat. The second cliff is lower, crowned by a sprawling fig tree. Beneath it lives Charybdis, who 3 times a day swallows the sea and 3 times spews it back like a boiling cauldron. If a ship finds itself there during the swallowing, not even Poseidon himself can save it. Keep closer to the cliff of Scylla, Circe advised, and there was no pity in her eyes. Better to lose 6 men than the whole ship. My warrior's mind revolted. I asked if I could fight Scylla, defend my crew with my storming bronze. The goddess flared in anger. Relentless fool, are you still thinking of military exploits and battles? She is immortal. There is no defense against her. The only way out is to run. Finally, she repeated the terrible warning of Tiresias, the island of Thrinacia, the sacred herds of Helios, the sun god, 7 herds of cows and 7 flocks of sheep who are never born and never die. If your men touch them with a blade, the ship and the entire crew will perish in fire, and you will return to Ithaca, a ragged beggar. I listened to her, but the poison of doubt that Agamemnon had poured into me back at the bloody trench was already festering in my heart. Whom to trust? A witch? The gods? I decided that my cunning mind could outsmart even prophecies. Part 2. The Sirens, Honeyed Death. In the morning, we weighed anchor. Circe sent us a favoring wind that beat merrily into the sails. I gathered the crew on deck. I looked into their exhausted faces and lied to them again. I told them only a part of Circe's words about the Sirens. I kept silent about the 6 maws of Scylla. I feared that panic would paralyze them, that they would drop their oars and hide in the hold, leaving us to die. A captain's fear is a death sentence for his crew. Suddenly the wind died. The sea became smooth, heavy, and slick. We furled the sails. I took a lump of beeswax, kneaded it with my hot hands, and plugged the ears of every warrior. They became deaf to the world. Me, by my own command, they seized, pressed against the oak mast and bound with heavy ropes. The ship closed in on the island. And then they sang. That voice, it didn't enter through the ears. It crawled under the skin, tickled the brain, turned the vitals inside out. They sang of Troy, of the great glory of the Achaeans. They promised me all-knowingness. We know everything that the Argives endured by the will of the gods. The promise of glory was so seductive, the song so beautiful, that my heart twisted with a wild desire to stay there on that blooming meadow. I forgot Ithaca, forgot my son. I forgot that this song is bought with death. I twitched my brows frantically, signaled my comrades, demanding they untie me, screaming without a sound, choking on my own spit. But Perimedes and Eurylochus leapt up. Their ears were plugged with wax. They could not hear my madness. They came over and bound me with even tighter ropes that bit into the flesh until it bled. Only when the island of the Sirens vanished from view, and the salty surf drowned out the sweet stench of their song, did the men pull the wax from their ears and set me free. A first victory? No. A defeat. I realized how cheaply my soul could be bought with a few words about my own greatness. Part 3. Scylla and Charybdis. The price of 6 lives. Soon smoke rose ahead. Massive waves, a terrifying roar of the sea broke out, making the planks vibrate beneath our feet. It was Charybdis. Terrified, the sailors dropped their oars. The ship stalled before the mouth of the abyss. I began to walk among them, cheering them on, reminding them how my mind had already saved them from the Cyclops Polyphemus. I used that same memory of my triumph just to force the men to row. I ordered the helmsman to keep as far as possible from the smoke and the churning waves of Charybdis, hugging the opposite cliff. Of Scylla I remained silent again, but my pride won out over Circe's counsel. Forgetting her strict order not to take up arms, I put on my heavy bronze armor. I dropped my hand to the hilt, drew my heavy bronze sword, and stood at the ship's bow, watching for the monster. I wanted to fight immortal evil. I wanted to prove that Odysseus was stronger than prophecies. What stupidity! The ship entered the narrow strait. On one side, Charybdis swallowed the water with an unbelievable roar. The sea boiled like a cauldron over a raging fire, spraying foam onto the tops of the cliffs. When she dragged the water down, the black bottom was laid bare, right to the black sand. Horror paralyzed the crew. Everyone looked left at Charybdis, expecting death from the abyss. While we stared at the whirlpool, Scylla struck from the right. She extended her long, fleshy necks from the cave and snatched 6 of my strongest, finest warriors right off the deck. I turned at the scream and saw only their arms and legs flying into the air, twitching erratically in the sky. "Odysseus!" they cried. They called my name in their final, desperate agony, clawing at the air as if I were still their almighty king. And I stood there in my useless, shining armor with a naked sword, and could do nothing. This bronze, which had struck terror into mortals at Troy, proved to be nothing but a worthless splinter here, a treacherous glint at the monster's feast. My muscles turned to stone, my weapon hand grew heavy. All my military experience, all my vaunted tactics rotted away in a single second before the raw primal force of chaos. I squeezed the hilt until my knuckles turned white, but the enemy was high above my blade, unreachable for human fury. Scylla dragged them up to her cave, and there, at the foot of the black cliff, she devoured them. I saw her long necks swallowing the living, twitching human flesh. My men thrashed in convulsions, screaming from the depths of her throats, their bones cracking under those 3-rowed teeth. Hot drops of their blood and shreds of torn clothes rained down onto the deck, washing away my pride. It was the most horrific sight I had ever witnessed in all my years of wandering. No underworld of Hades could compare to this shame. My fear and my silence cost them their lives. I didn't just fail to save them, I led them to the slaughter, marched them past one horror just to feed them to another. I fled, ordering the survivors to strike the oars harder, leaving the souls of my best warriors to agonize in the throat of the monster, exactly as we had left the slain to rot, unburied beneath the walls of Troy. Part 4. Sacred Blood and Sweet Dreams. Having escaped the monsters, we approached the beautiful island of Thrinacia. Even from the sea, a terrible sound pierced my ears, the lowing of cows and the bleating of Helios's sheep. Tiresias's warning flared like fire in my mind. I turned to my men, demanding we sail past. I screamed that the greatest disaster awaited us there, but Eurylochus stepped forward with a sharp objection. His eyes burned with mutiny, and his words cut like Agamemnon's talk of betrayal. "Your men are exhausted, sleepless, their hands worn to bloody blisters, and you forbid us to step on land to cook a hot supper. You force us to sail into the dead of night when ruinous storms are born." The rest of the crew backed him with a wild uproar. I remembered the prophet's words, "Trust is a noose." They outnumbered me, and my authority snapped like a dry pine. I agreed to the stop, but I bound them all with a terrible oath, to eat exclusively the food Circe had given us, and not to touch a single animal on the island. The next day, notice, the south wind rose. It blew with such force that we could not put out to sea. This storm lasted for an entire month. As long as we had the witch's bread and wine left, the men kept their promise. But when the provisions ran dry, hunger began to claw at their stomachs, eating out their insides. They roamed the island, trying to catch whatever fish or birds they could with curved hooks. But hunger was stronger. One day I went deep into the island to pray to the gods in solitude for salvation. And what did the immortals do? They cast a deep, heavy sleep over me. They clouded my mind as they had done before at Troy, to let fate fulfill itself. And while the knife entered the sacred throats of the cows back on the shore, the gods granted me a sweet, torturous illusion. I dreamed of the smell of blooming almonds on Ithaca, the soft bread on my father's table, and Penelope's cool, soothing hand on my forehead. I saw my home in my dream, alive and untouched, at the exact moment reality around me was turning permanently to ash. The gods lulled me with peace just to make my awakening hellish. While I slept, Eurylochus gathered the men for a brief, ruinous council. "The worst death is death by starvation," he whispered like a serpent. "Let us take the finest of Helios's cows, sacrifice them to the immortal gods, and upon our return to Ithaca, we will build Helios a magnificent temple. And if the god grows angry and sinks our ship, better to die in the sea in an instant than to waste away slowly from hunger on a deserted island." My men quickly drove out the sacred cows grazing nearby, surrounded them, slaughtered the animals, skinned them, burned the thighs for the gods, and spit the rest of the meat. Part 5. The Wrath of the Gods. I woke up and headed for the ship. Even from afar, the wind carried the smell of roasting fat to my nose. The metallic taste of panic, the very same from the trench in Samaria, convulsed my throat. I screamed in horror to the gods, realizing my men were doomed. The nymph Lampetia immediately informed Helios of the crime. The enraged sun god appeared before Zeus, demanding vengeance, threatening to descend into the realm of Hades and shine among the dead, to shine upon that ash I had just seen. Zeus promised to shatter our ship with his lightning bolt out in the open sea the moment we left the shore. For 6 more days, while the southern storm held us trapped, my companions feasted, stuffing their bellies with the cursed meat. The gods sent them terrifying omens that made the stomach run cold. The flayed hides of the animals crawled across the sand, and the meat on the spits, both raw and roasted, groaned with a pitiful lowing, like the voice of living cows in the flames. They gorged on the voices of those they had slaughtered, doomed and blinded by their sin. On the 7th day, the angry notice finally subsided. As soon as the sea calmed, we hurriedly raised sails and put out to sea, fleeing the desecrated island. But when Thrinacia vanished from sight, and nothing but sky and water remained, Zeus unrolled a cloud over us, black as night. The sea beneath us darkened. Suddenly a violent western wind, Zephyr, struck. A terrible squall snapped both forestays holding the mast. The heavy oak beam crashed backward, crushing the helmsman's skull. He flew overboard, and the waves instantly claimed his dead body. In that same heartbeat, Zeus struck the ship with a thunderbolt. The vessel shuddered from the lightning strike, filled with choking sulfur, and every single sailor was thrown into the sea. Like seabirds, they bobbed on the waves around the shattered ship, screaming, clutching at splinters. But the sea swallowed them forever. Not one of my companions survived. Tiresias's prophecy was coming true, word for word. I was left alone. The waves tore the hull planks from the keel. I managed to bind the keel and the mast together with a strap of oxhide, making a crude raft, and sat upon it. And then the south wind rose again. It carried me backward, straight toward the horrific Charybdis. By morning I arrived there. The monster was just beginning to swallow the water. My raft was sucked into the whirlpool, straight into the black rot. But I reacted on instinct. I leaped up and grasped the branches of a tall fig tree growing on the cliff. I hung there like a bat. Beneath me roared the abyss, ready to swallow my flesh. My feet had no foothold, my muscles tore from the strain, and cold sweat poured into my eyes. I waited. For hours. It felt like the torments of Sisyphus I had seen in the underworld, where my boulder was my own body, which I had to hold above death. At noon, when the judge rises from the bench for his midday meal, Charybdis finally spat the logs back out. I released my fingers, plummeted down, and crashed into the water next to the mast and keel. I quickly scrambled onto them and began to paddle wildly with my hands. By the will of Zeus, Scylla did not notice me this time. The gods spared me. The name of Odysseus was to be preserved for greater torments. For 9 days I was tossed by the raging sea, without water, without food. My skin peeled from the salt, my lips cracked to blood. On the 10th night the gods washed my raft onto the shore of the island of Ogygia. There lived Calypso, the nymph with the braided hair, who took me in, gave me warmth, and surrounded me with her stifling love, keeping me captive for 7 years, like a ghost in a cave. With this, I end my long tale. Did you want to hear the story of my glory, Alcinous? Now you know its true price. I am Odysseus, the great hero, the sacker of cities. But my name was bought with bronze, stupidity, lies, and the blood of my men. Tiresias was right. I returned alone, broken, on foreign timbers. Now only Ithaca lies ahead, where rats are already devouring my kingdom.